A new hypothesis proposed by geneticist David Reich radically complicates the simple out-of-Africa story and may fundamentally rewrite the way scientists think about both Neanderthals and modern humans. Rather than viewing Neanderthals as an ancient Eurasian species that later received a small amount of modern human DNA, the model explores the possibility that Neanderthals themselves may have originated from a population of early Homo sapiens that expanded into Eurasia hundreds of thousands of years ago, and then became genetically transformed through massive interbreeding with local archaic populations. If this model proves correct, the relationship between modern humans and Neanderthals would be almost the reverse of the conventional story. The central idea begins with a puzzle that has long troubled geneticists. When scientists compare the genomes of Neanderthals and modern humans, they find a strange mismatch between different parts of the genome. The nuclear DNA, the vast majority of the genome, shows that Neanderthals and modern humans diverged hundreds of thousands of years ago and evolved largely separately. Yet the mitochondrial DNA and the Y chromosome tell a different story. Both of these lineages appear to have entered the Neanderthal population from modern humans sometime around 300,000 years ago. In other words, Neanderthals carry mitochondrial and Y chromosome lineages that are closely related to those of modern humans rather than to older Eurasian archaic populations. This combination of signals has been extremely difficult to explain under the traditional model. If Neanderthals were a separate Eurasian lineage that occasionally interbred with modern humans, why would both their mitochondrial DNA and their Y chromosomes be replaced by modern human versions, while the rest of the genome remained overwhelmingly Neanderthal? The probability of both of these uniparentally inherited genetic systems being replaced by chance through a small admixture event is extremely low. The mismatch suggests that something much larger and more systematic happened in the deep past, as Reich explains in this video.
A question that I have is, do we still have a fundamentally wrong model of archaic modern human relationships? This is approximately the picture we now have, without even talking about the recent gene flow between Neanderthals and modern humans in New Guinea, Melanesia, and out of Africa. There's substructure in Africa, there is a deep lineage going into Denisovans, and the standard model has this very interesting event that I hadn't talked about, which is about 5% contribution of African modern humans to Neanderthals about 300,000 years ago. However, the mitochondrial DNA you get from your mother and the Y chromosome you get from your father, these are, in Neanderthals, something that's related within 300,000 or 400,000 years to modern humans. So if you believe this model, it must come from this event. The probability of that happening is 5% times 5%, so a very, very small number. It's been argued that maybe natural selection for the modern human mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome, which was better adapted, could explain this, but other work has shown that the rest of the genome for modern humans was strongly selected against. So it's a very strange story. So it makes one think, are we missing something important, and is there an alternative configuration about the relationships amongst these lineages that might explain the data? Maybe if we think very hard, we'll find it, or maybe we'll cut some Gordian knot and get more ancient DNA.
Reich's hypothesis proposes that the genetic pattern could be explained by a major population expansion beginning roughly 400,000 years ago. According to this scenario, a population related to early modern humans developed new technological and behavioral advantages, possibly including Levallois stone tool technology, improved hafting techniques, and expanded use of fire. These innovations may have allowed this population to expand rapidly across large regions of Africa and Eurasia, from homeland possibly in the Levant region. When such expansions occur in nature, population genetics predicts a phenomenon known as massive introgression. As the expanding population spreads into territories already inhabited by another group, individuals at the advancing frontier interbreed with the local population. Over many generations, this process can lead to a surprising outcome. The expanding population retains its culture and identity, but genetically absorbs large portions of the local population's genome. Reich's computer simulations demonstrate how this could occur. In the model, an expanding population moves across a landscape occupied by an archaic population. At the wavefront, where the expansion occurs, individuals from the expanding population repeatedly interbreed with the local archaic inhabitants. Because the expanding population continues to grow rapidly, the archaic genes introduced at the frontier become amplified generation after generation. Over time, the expanding population can end up carrying mostly local archaic genes, even though it originated from a different ancestral population. In the simulation results presented in the study, this process can lead to extreme outcomes. After a few hundred generations of expansion and interbreeding, the resulting population may retain only a tiny fraction of its original genome, while carrying mostly genes from the archaic population it absorbed. Yet crucial genetic lineages, such as mitochondrial DNA or Y chromosomes from the original population, can persist and even become universal within the new population. If this process occurred during the Middle Pleistocene, it could produce a population genetically similar to Neanderthals, while still retaining key genetic markers from the original Homo sapiens population that initiated the expansion. In other words, Neanderthals might represent the descendants of an early Homo sapiens expansion that became heavily introgressed with local Eurasian archaic humans, such as the populations related to those found at Cima de los Huesos in Spain. The implications of this model are profound. Under this scenario, Neanderthals would not simply be an archaic Eurasian species that occasionally interbred with modern humans. Instead, they would represent a population that began as early Homo sapiens but was gradually transformed genetically through sustained admixture with local archaic humans. This reinterpretation would help explain several long-standing puzzles in paleoanthropology. First, it would explain why Neanderthals and modern humans share mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosome lineages that appear more closely related than expected from the nuclear genome alone. If Neanderthals descended from a sapiens expansion that later absorbed archaic genes, these uniparental lineages would naturally remain from the original sapiens population. Second, it would help explain why Neanderthals and modern humans share key technological traditions, particularly the Levallois stone tool method. Archaeologists have long debated whether Levallois technology evolved independently in multiple regions or spread through migrating populations. If an expanding Homo sapiens population carried this technology into Eurasia and later became genetically transformed into Neanderthals, the shared technological heritage would make perfect sense. Third, the model offers a potential explanation for evidence of deep population structure. Genetic studies have increasingly suggested that modern humans are not descended from a single homogeneous population, but rather from the mixture of multiple lineages that diverged more than 1 million years ago and later recombined. Reich's model suggests that the same expansion event that produced Neanderthals through admixture in Europe may also have produced modern humans through admixture with archaic African populations, most likely in North Africa, with a branch related to Homo antecessor. This merging may be evidenced in the Jebel Irhoud fossil humans. In this interpretation, the Middle Pleistocene may have been a time of massive population movements and genetic mixing across large regions of the Old World. Instead of a simple tree with distinct species branching apart, human evolution would look more like a braided river in which populations repeatedly diverged, expanded, and merged again. Another striking aspect of the hypothesis concerns the genetic composition of Neanderthals themselves. The simulations show that an expanding population could end up carrying as much as 95% genetic ancestry from the archaic populations it encountered while still preserving its original mitochondrial DNA or Y chromosome. This means that Neanderthals could theoretically have originated from a population of early Homo sapiens, but later become genetically dominated by archaic Eurasian genes through continuous admixture with a European Heidelbergensis branch of hominins. In such a case, Neanderthals might be described as genetically archaic, but culturally and historically derived from an early sapiens expansion. The model also raises intriguing questions about the behavior of these ancient populations. For example, if the expansion involved sex-biased mating patterns, such as modern human males mating with archaic females or vice versa, this could help explain how certain genetic lineages became fixed, while others were replaced. Even small fitness advantages in mitochondrial DNA could lead to one lineage gradually replacing another over many generations. Importantly, Reich emphasizes that the hypothesis is not yet proven. It is presented as a model that successfully explains several puzzling observations simultaneously rather than as a definitive reconstruction of events. The strength of the hypothesis lies in its ability to account for multiple independent lines of evidence: genetic patterns, archaeological technologies, and the timing of population divergences. If further research supports this idea, the consequences for human evolutionary theory could be enormous. The out-of-Africa narrative, often presented as a simple migration of modern humans replacing archaic populations, would give way to a far more complex picture of repeated expansions, admixture events, and genetic transformations across continents. The theory that Neanderthals are essentially Homo sapiens with archaic admixture with Heidelbergensis people totally puts the nail in the coffin of the idea that Homo sapiens originated in Garden of Eden somewhere in East Africa and only successfully migrated out some 60,000 years ago. In such a world, the distinction between modern humans and archaic humans becomes less clear. In this world, Neanderthals are a branch of Homo sapiens, not a separate species. Populations that appear distinct genetically may actually represent different stages of admixture and transformation within a much larger network of interacting human groups. Rather than imagining Neanderthals as a dead-end branch of human evolution, we might instead view them as part of a dynamic evolutionary experiment, a population that began as early Homo sapiens but was reshaped by thousands of years of interaction with Eurasian archaic humans. This perspective also challenges the way we think about species boundaries in human evolution. If populations could repeatedly merge and exchange genes over hundreds of thousands of years, then the concept of separate species may be less meaningful than previously thought. Instead of discrete species, human evolution may have consisted of a shifting network of populations exchanging genes, technologies, and behaviors. The deeper message of the hypothesis is that human evolution may have been far more fluid and interconnected than the traditional tree-like model suggests. Instead of a single origin followed by replacement, the story may involve repeated waves of expansion, assimilation, and genetic transformation across Africa and Eurasia. If Reich's hypothesis continues to gain support, it may ultimately force scientists to rethink one of the most fundamental narratives in anthropology: the origin of modern humans themselves. Neanderthals may not simply be our distant cousins who evolved separately and vanished. They may represent a population that began as part of our own lineage and was reshaped by the complex genetic currents of the ancient world. In that sense, the boundary between us and them may have been far more blurred than anyone previously imagined. Thanks for watching.